Church in Fort Worth, Texas. I am your host, Senior Pastor Ryon Price. Our courageous conversations are meant to inform and encourage dialogue around some of the most critical issues facing our country and society. And they are also meant to introduce our viewers to inspiring people doing inspiring things. And tonight, we definitely have an inspiring person among us as we look forward to this courageous conversation with community activist, civil rights champion, church leader, and preacher, and Fort Worth icon, Miss Opal Lee. Miss Opal, welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I tell people I'm just a little old lady in tennis shoes getting in everybody else's business.
You do it so well. It's so good to be with you. You just make my heart big every time I'm with you. And wow, Miss Opal, it is so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
You've been busy giving keynotes all over the place with Visit Fort Worth annual breakfast and hanging out with stars like Carmelo Anthony, and you're giving us time tonight. So I think that is really cool. So thank you for that. All in an effort to promote unity and harmony and establish Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And I know, Miss Opal, that not everyone is from Texas that's watching us tonight, although there is room for them to come on.
Yes, indeed.
But I'm hoping that you might, just at the outset here, for those who may not be familiar with Juneteenth, to tell us a little bit about its history and your work with Unity Unlimited and Opal's Walk as you seek to make the 19th of June a federal holiday here in the United States.
Well, I really need to begin with letting people know that because the enslaved in Texas were the last to get word that they were free, like 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in by President Abraham Lincoln. They didn't know. Yes, they did. They did know. They just didn't have the backup, because we'd have watch night services, New Year's. People would wait and watch and listen for freedom to come. So we knew it was coming. We knew that. But when it did come, and General Gordon Granger made his way to Galveston with maybe 6,000 or 7,000 Black troops, and he began to let the people in Galveston know on the 19th day of June that all the enslaved, all slaves were free. Now, he nailed that General Order number 3 to the door of Reedy Chapel, African Methodist Episcopal Church. And when the people came in from their labors and somebody read that to them, we started celebrating, and we've been celebrating ever since. There are so many facets, so many things that happen when the people became free. And we have used this in our Juneteenth because we don't want people to think it's a Texas thing. Right. People from Texas have carried their Juneteenth celebration all over the world. It's not just celebrated in Texas. Some 47 states have Juneteenth. And even in Mexico and parts of Europe, where the men fought overseas, they carried Juneteenth with them.
And you, Miss Opal, have been carrying the banner over the last several years in trying to establish this as a federal holiday. And just for the sake of those folks who may not know you, tell us a little bit about Unity Unlimited and Opal's Walk.
Well, Unity Unlimited is the little nonprofit that has Juneteenth as one of its components, as well as Opal's Walk. Then there is Santa. We do something for Christmas and the children at that time. And there is the music, where all of these things come under unity. And there are several more of them. But unity is our little nonprofit that helps us keep together and do the things according to law.
And I understand it, the little nonprofit's getting a little bit bigger and gaining notoriety year by year as you're beginning to make progress on really sounding the trumpet here around the federal holiday.
I could tell you that we have an organization called the National June Observance Foundation, and it was started by Ronald Myers. Now, Dr. Myers was a medical doctor. He was a Baptist minister, and he was a jazz musician, all rolled into one.
Wow.
And a great big fella. And he was responsible for at least 43 of the 47 states that celebrate Juneteenth. He was somebody, and he worked untiringly to have Juneteenth made a national holiday. So we're going to keep on walking and keep on talking until it is a national holiday.
I think you're carrying the torch very well, Miss Opal. I'm going to ask you in a moment, we're going to talk a little bit more about your history, but I was just noting your language, which I think is so interesting to me. When you were describing the events of June 1863, 64, 65, you were using this word "we." It almost in the sense of your very presence there, and that's sort of like in the biblical tradition when the Bible says you were slaves in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very powerful generation to generation. It doesn't matter which generation you may be speaking of. There's a kind of connection with the story and with the people. It's just, tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, when you choose that word, it's powerful.
Well, really, I keep saying that Juneteenth is a unifier, that it is the bridge between our being free. And I don't know whether people understand that we're not free yet, that there are so many disparities that need our attention. And if we could work together to get them done, for instance, our schools need to have the textbooks to tell what actually happened, so that people can understand it, so that they could know this did happen. I wasn't a part of it, but let me see how I can rectify what did go on. Our health care needs to be addressed, where people can get the kind of health care they need and the poor not shunted aside. Jobs and joblessness, all these things need to be addressed. If I've got a job and you've got a job and I'm getting paid one thing and you're getting paid more, that's not fair. We need to adjust those things. Climate change. People don't really understand how the weather affects what we do daily. And we are responsible for what happens. We need to do better than what we're doing to help our climate. to be sure that we don't have the floods and the glaciers and the whatever else is happening with nature. We can do something about that.
I love that
We
word.
can do it.
I think that word is very important to you in the ways I've heard it over and over again, your sense of unity. And I know that when it comes to the 19th of June, that is an important date, not only for America, for descendants of enslaved persons, but I know it's an important date for you personally. And I know something very poignant, powerful happened to you and your family on June 19th, 1939. And I want to talk about that in a moment. But first, I want you to tell me, just sort of to set the stage a little bit, about how you ended up here in Fort Worth and what life was like for Black people in the late 1930s.
I'd have to tell you that I was born in Marshall, Texas. That my parents.
Marshall, Texas, that's East Texas.
Yeah, right on the Louisiana border, like Shreveport, 30 miles. Marshall's 30 miles from Shreveport. My mother from Texarkana and had gone to Marshall to go to school. She married my father. And that's a beautiful story because he followed her home to Texarkana and asked her father to marry her. And father did give the consent, but she said, look, not marrying until you build me a house like the ones I saw at Tuskegee when I went with a 4-H club group. And she gave him a drawing. She didn't hear from him for 2 years. And when he came back, he told her he had built that house. So they moved to Marshall, Texas, and that's where I was born. My brothers too. And my father left during the Depression in the 30s, coming to Fort Worth to find work.
Okay.
And he was going to send for his family. My mom had to sell all the possessions we had and follow him a couple of years later. If we got to Fort Worth on a Saturday, my mom was working in somebody's kitchen on Sunday. They bought a house. Took them some time. If we were there in 37, it was 39 when they bought a house. Corner of Annie and New York Street in Fort Worth. And my mom had it fixed up so nice. But the paper says 500 people gathered on the 19th of June, mind you. Police there, who the paper says couldn't control the crowd. But when my dad came from work with a gun, the police told him, if you bust a cap, we'll let this mob have you. Mm. So my parents sent us to friends several blocks away. They left the house under cover of darkness, but those people tore that place asunder. They burned furniture.
Just to interrupt you, why were the people there?
They were people in that neighborhood. I just believe they were folk who lived in the neighborhood who did not want Black folk living next to them.
So and I had white neighbors.
Yeah, I wished, I thought if they had not bothered us, they'd have found out that we didn't want anything more than they did, a decent place to stay, a job that paid a decent wage, our being able to go to school from where we lived. But that didn't happen. So I'm not sure whether that colored my thinking or not, but I think that Juneteenth is a unifier. I think it means freedom. I really do. I think we should celebrate it from the 19th to the 4th of July because we weren't free July the 4th, 1776. But festival is not all that Juneteenth is about. We have so many more components, and other Juneteenths do. They have these components too, because we are trying to educate people that we are a one people. I hate when I fill out papers and say, I'm an African American. I just want to be an American. Hello? That's all I want. And I want people, and it sure is going to take a lot longer time than I have to get them to understand that we all bleed red blood. We are all alike. And if we really know our history and scientific whatever, we all came from Lucy over in Africa, and some folk got busy getting too close to the cotton picking sun, and there you don't have any color. My point is, we are all so much alike. And I remember reading about the Irish, how people treated them when they came here, and other nationalities never treated as bad as we were, but they were treated differently. And it shouldn't be that way. It just shouldn't.
Miss Opal, one of the things that I just love about you is every time I talk to you, there's just like my heart just gets bigger. You, in spite of what has happened to you and the trauma which had to have affected you and your family, there is still this remarkable sense of a kind of freeness. You're free of bitterness, and I'm wondering if you could tell me, where does your sense of forgiveness come from? Because it must take some deep sense of forgiveness for you to be in the place you are.
And maybe it does, but I belong to the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And that, I don't know if I belong to the Baptist Church, I'd have the same idea. But we've been taught that forgiveness is something that we are about. Christ forgave us. And why couldn't we not forgive our fellow man? That's what we've been taught. It's ingrained. It's in our DNA. Forgiveness is part of our being a human being. And boy, have I had to forgive a whole lot of things. Do you hear? But that's what it's about.
The AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal, and I know that you belong to Baker Chapel AME Church, a very historic congregation here in Fort Worth. And the AME Church, you said it a moment ago, it was Reedy Chapel was an AME church, or still is, in Galveston, where the Emancipation Proclamation was nailed to the door. AME churches have had a long standing sense of justice. The AME church is a place that has been really a symbol of freedom for Black people. And of course, it was an AME church that was attacked in Charleston.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about the tradition that you come out of. You've talked about forgiveness, but then there's this other side of justice, which the AME church has been so strong on.
I just remember reading and hearing about Richard Allen and
the founder,
trials.
One of the founders of AME church.
And the kinds of trials that little congregation went through. To begin with, they were worshiping with one of the big churches in Philadelphia. I think it was St. George. But they were pulled from their knees from the chancellor rail and told if they'd go up in the balcony, they'd be closer to God. And Alan said to them, if you let us finish our prayers, you won't be bothered with us. And he marched his little band across the street to a blacksmith shop. And that's where he held his services. Do you know that congregation tried to take that church from them? Of course, the Lord was in the plan and they prevailed. But there were pandemics in that day and time. And Alan and his little bunch of people helped and did everything they could to help those people who were suffering the kind of plague that was going on at that time. Do you think they were appreciative? Not really. They told lies on them that they were stealing, all those kinds of things. But he forgave them. Those people forgave them. And if they could, we can. And if God can forgive all the things that have, I just know that forgiveness is part of the whole situation. It has to be.
You are a mighty strong witness to Christ, my dear friend, and I give thanks for that. Such an inspiration to so many in the ways in which you live your life, and I thank God for your witness. Some questions about your sense of kind of where Fort Worth is going. You know, we're living in a time both nationally and also within our own community where we've seen a lot of tension, especially tension around issues of race. And I was hoping that you might just talk a little bit about what your sense is about peace and justice, truth and reconciliation, and kind of where we're hoping to go as a community and also as a nation.
I'm not sure that we all understand what peace and justice really is. You know, I know that when I think of peace, I think of friendship and harmony and the absence of hostility and violence and a lack of conflict, no wars. Peace, that's what I think of. Freedom from violence. I think of those things when I think of peace. And I wonder if other people do too. And then when you talk about justice, there's something we learn about moral fitness. You know, we learn about law and ethics and religion and just being fair. And when we do the peace and justice stuff and have it with the truth and reconciliation and that truth, that belief that truth is an accepted thing. You know, I believe that you are the pastor of Broadway Baptist Church. That's the truth. Huh? All right. Isn't that the truth? This business of reconciliation, that's a group of people or just a person. They get to be friendly again because they've been out of sorts with each other. And so after these disagreements that ought to make amends, and whatever it takes to make amends, they should do it.
Mm.
Huh? So I don't know, when you put those together, you know, stir it in a pot, we ought to come up with being able to help each other and help folk with these disparities that I've been talking about. I just know that we can do better than what we are doing. And do you know, fear is one of the things that's keeping us from doing that. Fear that Black people are going to raise up and do the hateful and mean things that were done to them. Our Bible doesn't teach us that. And there are more of us who are Christians than there are not, I believe. And so I don't think people have to fear that kind of stuff. And then again, when there are disasters, when there's, say, the pandemic, you see how these people, Black, white, green, or whatever, have done? They work 24/7 together. The same thing happened when the slaves were free. Who was that? Lord Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, John Brown. All those people worked in sync to get those people out of slavery. The Underground Railroad that went north, the Underground Railroad that went to Mexico because they freed their slaves years before. Those people worked together. They didn't ask anybody what color they were. And the same thing's happening now when we've got the crisis. Every time we have a crisis, we can work together. And then we pull apart.
We need to come together and stay together.
That's true. Yeah. And do you know what else? I know I'm preaching to the choir, but
that's okay.
Each one of us should be a committee of one. We know the people at our club, at our church, that are not on the same page we are on. And I think it's our responsibility to change their mind. If a person can be taught to hate, he can be taught to love. And there are so many people who need to be taught to love.
That's very powerful. Miss Opal, let's talk a little bit more about Juneteenth. You've got a beautiful quilt pattern behind you. You are the embodiment of Juneteenth in so many ways. We have some events coming up, one of which is taking place at Broadway. And I want to touch on those, and then we're going to go back and talk a little bit more broadly. But I want to talk some about the events which are taking place locally this coming June. You've taken Juneteenth in Fort Worth, Texas, and turned it into a month-long kind of event. And I think you've done a great job with that. So tell us what all we have planned.
Well, to begin with, we're going to have a flag raising. And I don't know, we've got Dion, who's my granddaughter, who knows all about these activities. And so I'm going to let her tell you something about
Good. Them. Dion, that would be great. Dion,
yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah.
Hello, Pastor Ryan. Hello. So our very first event is with you guys at Broadway, which is our unity in prayer service, because we have got to thank God for all that he has done.
Amen.
Then on the 5th, which is Saturday.
That is taking place June 4th.
June 4th at 9:30. At 9:30 at Broadway.
9:30. Great. I got
okay.
It. 9:30.
At 9:30. And we're going to broadcast it live. And we're going to stream it so people can see it. But we would like for people to come out and worship with us. And it is an ecumenical service. So it is for everyone to come out and show this unity in the spirit. So that's the main thing. Then Saturday the 5th, we have our Miss Juneteenth pageant that will be at 5:30 at Texas Wesleyan University in the Ann Wagner Theater. Wonderful. And then the next weekend, starting on Friday, we have By the Block, which is our entrepreneurial expo. And it starts with Miss Opal and Dr. Maria Hammond. You guys have got to come hear her. She was defending her dissertation this year on her study of the Southern Underground Railroad. We've all learned about the Northern Underground Railroad into Canada, but because Mexico abolished slavery in 1824, slaves in Texas escaped into Mexico. And so she's done her dissertation about understanding that area of life, and the fact that there are cities in Mexico that celebrate Juneteenth. So she is connecting us to those cities, and that's that international feeling of unity that Juneteenth brings. And our goal is to help people find themselves in the Juneteenth story. Because so for so many times we've allowed Juneteenth to be relegated to just an African American holiday. And it's not. It has so many components to it. So she and Miss Opal are going to be talking about that at the beginning of By the Block. And then we will also have a panel of C-level executives that are going to talk to those that are getting into business, starting the pandemic has birthed so many small businesses because, folks had to get laid off their jobs. So there's a lot of people that are, stepping out on faith and, starting their own companies, things that they've always wanted to do. And so this is going to be an investment in themselves to listen and sit at the feet of some of the executives that are in our area, and some are coming from out of town. So that's the 11th. And then on the 12th, we have Empowering You. So as Ms. Opal said, Juneteenth is more than a festival. It is about getting information into the hands of people so they can make better choices for their lives. Because when the slaves were freed, okay, I'm free, now what? They had to act on information. They had to have a plan. They had to think through. Some did leave to say, hey, I'm gone. But others stayed and worked on the plantation, and others had to go find their family. So they used information to guide their next steps. And that's what Empowering You is about, empowering the individual to make choices. And so there's a health fair, job fair, financial fair. We got Regions Bank, which is coming on as our sponsor of our financial information, home ownership, and getting out of debt, repairing your credit. So all these things are available at Texas Wesleyan for our Empowering You. And then the next weekend, as you said, we've got a month-long things going on, but is our big day on the 19th.
Which is a Saturday this year.
That's Saturday, the 19th. We start with Miss Opal's walk, our signature 2.5 miles. We will start and stage at Evans Plaza off of 35 in Rosedale, so Evans, and she will walk 2.5 miles down to the courthouse. And some folks have looked at that route and said, that's more than 2.5 miles, but both me and the police have checked it, and it is 2.5 miles. And so my dad's like, that's more than that, but it's 2.5. Like I'm really going to walk my grandmother more than she.
And the 2.5 it symbolizes 2.5 years.
The 2.5 years. That it took enforcement to reach the enslaved in Texas. So it's a symbolic reason why she chose 2.5 miles. But that is Saturday morning, the 19th. And then we take a break, and from 3 to 9, we will be having our community festival at Panther Island Pavilion. So that's from 3 to 9, and we'll end the day with fireworks, music, children's area, food, vendors, the whole community festival. But we will end the night with fireworks, and that will end our month of June events. And we're moving our youth, Your Voice Unleashed, which is our signature unity event, which is where kids come together all across different denominations and races, and they work a whole week. They work a whole week to prepare for a concert, and they have Black clinicians, Hispanic clinicians, and white clinicians that teach them different songs of praise and styles, because that's how you bridge through exposure. Yeah. You let them know that you don't think you don't like something because you've never tried it. So they learn Spanish, and so it's just really neat. Wonderful. And so it's free to them, and then they have a concert at the end of the week. So, there's just a lot of things that we do to instill the principle of Juneteenth, which is freedom and unity. Wonderful.
I was going to ask you how we could find out more, but I've been told that we have in the chat a link to Unity Unlimited's website where we can find a lot more information about things that are taking place. So that's good. Is there any other resource we should take a look at and know about?
So they can go to Juneteenth, and I'm putting it in the chat now, ftw.com. which gives them directly the things that we're doing for Juneteenth. So they can get the lineup there. Unity Unlimited is the nonprofit for which we do everything else. So we have Opal's Farm, Secret Santa, our Your Voice Unleashed is there, and we do some other community events throughout the year. Our Irma Hadley Honors Banquet is a part of what Unity Unlimited does. So there's lots and lots.
Y'all have lots going on. You're doing a great job. Ryon, thanks so much for doing
Thank you,
this.
Pastor Ryan.
Miss Opal, I want to ask you, when and not if, when we get there and Juneteenth becomes a federal holiday, what will that mean for all of us?
Oh, Pastor, I'm not so sure I know how to answer that, because I just know I'm going to do a holy dance. I just know, but it will be on the calendar, and people who've not yet known about it will see and understand and try to find out what it means. It means that companies who right now are giving their employees off the Juneteenth day when they didn't know about it before, right now, companies are beginning to have meetings with their employees and finding out these people who worked for them, they didn't even know who they were or what they needed. There's so much that Juneteenth is implying now that is going to become a reality. And I'm so grateful that people are embracing it.
I think that's wonderful. Ms. Opal, I know you do a lot of things, and we've got a little time to talk about one of the other things that you do, and that's Miss Opal's Farm, which is no small project. So I wish you would just tell us a little bit about that.
I'd have to tell you that Miss Opal and some other people put together a food bank, and the one we had burned, and we were still struggling to give people food. I still take food to people the 1st and the 15th of the month.
Wait, hang on. So you're delivering food?
Yeah, boxes of food to people who are bedridden or in wheelchairs or can't stand in lines. I still take people.
I know you're okay with this because I've heard you in other contexts say you brag about your age. So you're 94, is that right?
Yeah, and I'm really good pushing for 95.
And you're still delivering food?
Yes, indeed, I am.
What's everybody else's excuse? Okay, go ahead.
So people standing in line at the food bank, we're feeding 500 families a day. Well, you need to know that we had paid some $4,000 a month for this new place, and I nearly had a hemorrhage because I didn't know where we were going to get the money, but the Lord saw to it that we had it for 11 months. And the month we didn't have it, the owners came to us and said, "We think you're doing a good job, so we're going to give you this facility." $1.3 million facility that they gave to us. And it's still operating at this point. So I polled people standing in line, and about 66 of them said they were willing to farm. I asked Trinity, Trinity Authority, and they gave us the use of 13 acres on the Trinity River. We are growing some food, no fertilizer. We've got a farm manager. He's off the chart. Oh, he's so good. And he loves farming. Hello, you got somebody who loves what they're doing. He is
Greg Joel.
Oh, yeah.
I
Joel.
love him.
Have you met Joel?
Yes.
Woo! Joel, Gregory Joel is somebody in my book. So we thought we would work with people who'd been incarcerated and couldn't find a job. And we're wanting to teach them how to farm. And there's more to farming than just sticking some seeds in the ground. There's a whole lot to farming. And then they get certified by one of the colleges in the area, Texas A&M, TCU, Paul Quinn. And then they are ready to go out and teach people. And this pandemic is saying that we need to teach people how to grow their own food in their own backyard and on the vacant lots. We need that. And so these are people that we are working with. And we take volunteers, and a lot of volunteers help Joel with that farm. And he goes to market with the produce. He gives some of it to the WIC program. I tell you, I don't know what I'd look like behind one of those plows or on one of those tractors, but I'm so glad to have Joel. I don't know what to do.
You know, you've done remarkably. You've just taken your little seed and you keep casting it everywhere. And it just seems like you don't doubt that there's good soil out there and it's going to find its way, and you just keep making things happen. So I'm betting on Miss Opal when it comes to Juneteenth and a federal holiday. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see that holy dance, Miss Opal. I'm looking forward to that.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because I know, honestly, I've had so much help from the Lord. The fact that I'm still here is one of those things. When I get up and say my prayers, I say, thank you for another day. Each time I do. I really do. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a couple of final questions.
Okay.
What is your dream for this city?
Fort Worth that I love. I think, again, it's going to be a one-on-one affair where we let people know that we're on the same page. And I'm not just talking about white folk. There are a whole lot of Black folk that need to come and learn that we belong and can do things together. And I want Fort Worth to be the city that shows the rest of them how it can be done. I want Fort Worth to be on the map for letting people know that we can get along. I do.
That's a beautiful dream. And Miss Opal, what about for America?
America's going to learn. It's just taking longer. That's all. America's going to learn. But Pastor, you must get a book called what? CREATE.
Cast.
It's Cast.
Cast.
Have you read it? Have you read it?
My wife has read it, and I haven't read it yet. But
You've got to read it.
So
You've got to read Cast, Pastor.
Isabel Wilkerson is the author, and she's also the author of a book about the Great Migration.
Yeah.
But I hear that Cast is very, very powerful. So go ahead.
It is, and I'm wanting everybody I know to read Cast. You understand? I think it's pivotal. If people will understand where we're coming from, huh? Folk just don't know our history.
Yeah. And to put a little harder edge on it, there's some folks who are invested in not teaching that history.
I know. And I worry about our schools not wanting to teach the things that are the truth. I worry about what they're going to put in the textbooks next, because what they have in them now is not the truth. And generations have been brought up on those textbooks. We need to do something about it. So, hey, look, let me tell you, I wrote a little book. Can you see it? It's called Juneteenth for Children.
Okay.
All right, the church needs to get it for the youngsters.
We're going to get that book in our library, Miss.
Yes. Get it for the children. And here's another one. This one that I wrote for the little ones, but this one by Charles Taylor for the older children. Get it in your library here.
I love, Miss Opal used to be a teacher, and she's still coming with her resources. I love that.
Oh, gee.
Miss Opal, thank you so much for this time.
Okay. I need you to let everybody know that they too can be a part of this Juneteenth. All they have to do is to go to opalswalktodc.com, find the link, and give us their signature. We took 1,500,000 signatures to Congress in September, and we want to take another 1,500,000 signatures to Congress for this Juneteenth. We don't want them to forget that we are around. So we're not thinking about Juneteenth just the one day. We're going to do something on Juneteenth all year round. We're going to keep talking. We're going to keep walking until Juneteenth's a national holiday.
God bless you. I love you so much, and I give thanks for you, and I know you're going to do it. So I'm looking forward. Miss Opal, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
God bless you.
Turn it off.